What is going on, you beautiful bastards out there in YouTube land? Today we are talking about a gentleman who experienced the largest amount of concentrated radiation any human has ever been exposed to. And he actually lived to pretty much be studied for another 83 days. So, if you guys are a fan of the unusually strange and just demented side of reality on this earth that we live on, I'd greatly appreciate you hitting that subscribe button down below. But without further ado, let's just dive right into the video, shall we? Alrighty guys, I'm going to be 100% real with you. I'm not a nuclear physicist. I know, right? Crazy. I totally look like one. But either way, guys, I'm not going to pretend like I understand what happened to Hayasashi Oshii. Okay? We're going to take place and tell the story of what happened after. In a nutshell, what happened was, at the time, Oshii was working for the Takayamura power plant, which provided 30% of Japan's power. And it was all nuclear power. So he was standing over this large vat in a room, and he was pouring one chemical into another chemical. That's pretty much what I can understand of it. When something went wrong and blasted back right in his face, the whole room turned blue, and he was exposed to the largest amount of concentrated radiation any human has ever seen. And he walked away from it. The doctors were blown away. This man should be dead. Little do they know, he was dead. He was a walking corpse at this time. The next 10 days, he pretty much was airlifted to a hospital. When they ran all the tests, he just had a swollen hand. He had some redness here and there around his body, but nothing really looked as though this man just seen this large explosion, right? So as this man's at the doctor's for the first handful of days, he's actually in good spirits. He's talking with the doctors, making jokes about how he'll get better and disappear, and oh, I'm just going to get out of here in so many days. They started running tests, and they found out that, well, Oshii, sorry to tell you this, but you won't. Your chromosomes, your genetic makeup has been scrambled. Your DNA is pretty much unrecognizable. He had no more immune system. His white blood cells did not have the capability of regenerating. His body was slowly shutting down with him being alive. So they started running tests, and Jesus Christ, this is where it gets scary. So around day 10 or 11, Oshii was actually given his own private facility, just a very large plastic room pretty much, and handfuls of doctors were coming and going, doing handfuls of tests left and right. They were sticking it with needles, pulling out bone marrow to test that. They were doing blood samples left and right. They were even doing skin grafts, and it got to the point where, like I said, this man was rotting away day by day. It got to the point where when they were peeling off medical tape, skin was coming off with him, and his body didn't have the ability to actually regenerate these skins, so he throughout time just had all these large open wounds and sores that were just oozing and pussing, like just not healing himself, as these doctors would come in and work around him. At a certain point, he was having a much harder time breathing, and he was pretty much shitting blood. Doctors ran x-rays and realized his lungs were filled with blood, and his intestines were practically eating themselves, deteriorating and leaking out. So they went in with syringes to remove all the fluid from Oshii's lungs, and this didn't help, and it was only creating more wounds and more sores for him. So they ended up having to stick a breathing tube and hook him up to a machine to keep him breathing, which pretty much at day 13 to day 83, he was unable to speak. They were saying his last couple of words before them sticking this tube down his throat. He was pleading with them, hey, I'm in pain. I'm not your guinea pig. And they were saying that he was begging for his mother. By this time, his physical appearance was deteriorating drastically, to the point where his hands had open sores, his body had open sores, his skin and flesh were rotting away. It got to the point where doctors would start to try to clean these wounds, and his skin would simply just wash right off. His body would consistently just ooze, to the point where when they tried to skin graft onto these open sores, the skin would not take and would actually move around the body because of this liquefied outside he was becoming. It got to the point where every day Oshii would have to be almost wrapped up like a mummy, where he would have gauze applied to his entire body, which would end up taking doctors about 2.5 hours simply to put on so they can keep him together. So about by day 50, due to these bandages being placed on him and taken off and replaced, the majority of his skin was pretty much gone. He was just one open wound, leaking about 2.5 liters of pus a day. On top of that, his muscles were pretty much decaying as well. They were necrotizing while he was still alive. His skin got so bad, once again, he was not able to take skin grafts due to his body leaking this much fluid. But in the process, his eyelids were almost destroyed from these bandages, to the point where he was no longer able to close his eyes. He was an eyelidless man. And at one point, he actually started to bleed from his eyeballs, almost looking like he was crying tears of blood. This happened, people. This is a true story that blows my mind. They kept this gentleman alive, just pumping him with approved and non-approved drugs, trying to jumpstart his body. Towards the end of his life, he was unable to move. He was strapped up into a medical bed like a puppet. Hands, fingers, everything was tied up, to the point where when doctors would come in, all he can do, especially with a breathing tube down his throat and his eyelids rotted away, all he can do is twitch and groan in pain as these people applied medical aid to him. So by day 59, 60, Oshii was on his way out. He went into cardiac arrest and had a heart attack. But the doctors weren't having it. They pretty much massaged his heart back 3 different times, bringing him back to life simply to study him further. 3 times this gentleman's heart gave out, and they brought him back. By day 60, he was losing about 10 liters of fluid by this point, pretty much flushing them out naturally, whether it be green ooze from his intestines and or blood from his intestines rupturing. Like I said, constantly being rewrapped. And after his heart attacks, his kidneys went out. So they ended up putting him on dialysis and more test meds, simply keeping this gentleman alive as long as humanly possible. So by day 60, 3 heart attacks, his body is incapable of regenerating fresh skin. He is one large walking open sore, crapping out his insides and bleeding through his eyeballs. So this man lived another 20 days. And by day 81, the majority of his insides have failed. Most of his major organs had failed. The only thing that he was really responding to was when they were shining flashlights in his eyes, his pupils would actually move, and he would make noise to his name being called. So at day 81, after all of this, there still seemed, after everything decayed and was rotting away, that there was still some brain activity present in Oshii. But like I said, after day 81, they reached out to the family and said, hey, is this it? And they ended up slapping a do not resuscitate on Oshii. So between day 81 to 83, they started backing down from all these drugs that they were feeding him, and taking him off all these machines, keeping him alive and able to breathe, pumping oxygen into him. And by day 83, his heart finally gave out for the last time, and Oshii finally slipped away off this mortal realm. So I did forget to mention that after day 83, when his heart finally did give out, they ended up doing an autopsy. And the autopsy results came back stating that every organ in his body had failed, and his muscles have already begun to rot and deteriorate away. This man was a rotting corpse with a beating heart and some brain activity. It blows my mind to even imagine the reality that this man was in as he took his last breaths. Honestly, pretty fucking disturbing. So, if you guys enjoyed this video in any sense, if you made it this far and you're not subscribed, think about hitting that button. It's free for you and helps the channel grow, helps other people's eyes get on this channel. So I'd greatly appreciate it. If you found it enjoyable, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, there's a thumbs down button for that as well. Either way, guys, if you have any suggestions, leave them down in the comments below. I have my first ever suggestion on TikTok for Albert Fish. So that video is coming up shortly. That guy is twisted. If you don't know who Albert Fish is, in a nutshell, he killed and ate children in the early 1900s. So keep an eye out for that video. I've been diving down the rabbit hole of the Green River Killer. He is a local serial killer in my neck of the woods. That video is on the rise as well. So once again, guys, I appreciate all the time you spent here on the channel, and thanks for tuning in. You guys have a wonderful day, and stay away from nuclear radiation and your government.